Let me preface this story by saying that I always thought that the supernatural does not exist. To my knowledge, nothing creepy has ever happened to me or my family. I never believed in horror stories or the like. I have not seen my father in a long time. So when the invitation came, I gladly took the offer. It has been a year and a half since my last visit. When I arrived, we talked a bit about the time we all lived in Colorado. When my mom and him were still together, after they broke up, he moved to Pennsylvania. I always wondered why he didn't stay in Colorado. With the money he earned, he could have easily had a 4-room apartment and keep his friends. I asked him this time. I thought, whatever reason he would give, I'd understand. We are both adults after all. I was not prepared for his story. He told me that he used to be a truck driver back in the 90s. Mostly delivery and pickups. He traveled all across Utah. And one time he accepted a delivery to Oklahoma. A well-paid, easy job. It was winter, and he was driving to the delivery points. He was very relaxed. Admired the beautiful winter landscape. Business as usual. He reached the delivery points, unloaded his cargo, and drove back. He did have to take a different road, however, due to snow blocking the interstate he used to get there. So he is driving back, passing a few small villages and into the woods. He has been driving for 20 or 30 miles by now. No other cars present. He was paying attention to the road as he saw a man standing on the side. I thought it was a tree stump at first. My father says, I thought he was lost. Why would you wander the woods in winter? My dad hit the brakes, but due to the snow the truck kept sliding down the road. After a glance in the rearview mirror, he saw the man still standing there. So my dad leaned out the window and yelled, "Hey, do you need a ride?" The man slowly turned around, stared for a few seconds, and then slowly started approaching. It was at this point I felt something being wrong. I can see my dad's hand shaking. I mean, at first he looked like a normal guy: jeans, a gray t-shirt, a cap, sport shoes. But as the man came closer, my dad noticed his eyes. They were easily 3 times the size of normal human eyes, and his upper teeth were protruding from under his lips. My dad shat himself, rolled up the window, and floored it. The man started chasing him. My dad sped up, but the man kept running after him. At this point, he is driving 60-70 miles per hour, but the strange man still keeps up. Then another joins him, and then 3 more run out of the forest and give chase. My father was bawling at this point. Either I lose control of the truck and crash, or those creatures do me in, were his thoughts at the moment. He does not remember how he got out of the forest. The creatures did not follow him beyond the tree line. My father drove straight to a gas station, you know the kind, with cheap food and shitty parking. Tears streaming down his face, he told the gas station owner everything. Yet that dude was just laughing at my father, saying that he should cut down on the booze. Otherwise he'll see more things like that. So after a while my dad was "fuck it." The owner clearly didn't believe him. My dad ordered some whiskey, paid for the parking spot, and went to sleep in his truck. I woke up at night. My dad says had to use the bathroom. It was dark. No lights were on. So my father decided to switch on the car lights to get to the toilet. Once the sweepers ran across the windshield, he saw the creatures stand around him. 10 of them, my dad says, and his voice almost fails him. 10 of them, standing around, staring at me with those abominable eyes. One had blood dripping down from his mouth. My dad's only thought was fuck. He hit the signal horn. The truck roared and the creatures scattered. My dad immediately floored it from the gas station, speeding all the while. The worst part, he says, was not seeing anything. If they were chasing me still. He drove through to Colorado without sleeping. After this, my father developed a habit of getting up at night and looking out the window. He says that he began to fear the creatures, that they found out where he lives. And one night he saw them, 3 of them, standing underneath the streetlight, staring up at him with those horrible eyes of theirs. My father immediately bolted the door, covered up the windows, and called up a friend who was also staying late. He spent the entire night talking to his friend, so he wouldn't feel alone. Next day my father immediately packed a bag and got on a train to Connecticut to visit some relatives. From there he put up his flat on sale and moved to California. He now lives in the center of the city in a rundown 2-room apartment. But at least I never saw those creatures again, he says. I ran a YouTube channel with my 2 friends, Patrick and Damien. Our latest video idea was to explore East Lake Higher Old School. It had shut down during our final year after a teacher was murdered. The place had already been struggling financially, And after the incident, the district decided to absorb it into another school instead of fixing it up. We knew how to get in. The security was lax, no cameras, no patrols. I had cut a hole at the bottom of the wire fence with bolt cutters, just wide enough for us to squeeze through. We slid our bags under first, then crawled in after. Patrick, our worst cameraman, insisted on filming the exterior shots, which meant he was nervous and wanted to scope out potential hiding spots. The school was in worse shape than we remembered. Weeds poked through cracks in the pavement, vines crawled up the faded brick walls, and graffiti marred the already shattered windows. It had never been the biggest or best funded school, but seeing it like this, a decaying husk felt wrong, as if something had been growing here, like a defiant mold. Damien suggested we jump straight into filming our hide and seek challenge while our nerves were still fresh. We drew straws, and Damien got the short one, meaning he had to be the seeker. Before we split up, I reminded everyone to mute their phones to avoid giving away our spots. Damien started a 5-minute timer, and Patrick and I sprinted off in opposite directions. I remembered getting lost once on my way to science class. There was a shortcut through the old teacher's lounge, and tucked away in that area was a storage closet used for PPE equipment. Most of it had probably been stolen by now, but it was the perfect hiding spot. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me, and crouched between empty shelves, my breath shallow as I listened to the silence settle. Then, footsteps. I tensed. Damien was good, but there was no way he'd found me this fast. A flashlight beam swept across the floor outside the closet. My pulse hammered in my ears as I peered through the narrow gap in the door. An older man, maybe in his 50s, stood in the room, wearing a green sweater vest. Mr. Davy. My breath caught. It couldn't be. Mr. Davy had been my old science teacher, and it was due to his death that the school shut down. But there he was, standing just a few feet away. His head tilted as he sniffed the air like an animal tracking prey. My stomach twisted as he took slow, deliberate steps toward the closet. His eyes darted. His nostrils flared. He was going to find me. Then, there was a loud metal clang. It came from somewhere deeper in the school. The Mr. Davy look-alike snapped his head toward the noise before sprinting off in that direction. I stayed frozen, my body refusing to move until the sound of his footsteps faded. Then, as quietly as I could, I slipped out through a nearby window and pulled out my phone. 5 missed calls, and a text from Damien. "There's someone here. Get out NOW. I found a phone. I think it's Patrick's. Is he with you?" My stomach dropped. I bolted toward our entry points. Damien was already there, pacing by the fence, his face pale in the moonlight. "Did you see Patrick?" he asked. I shook my head. No, and I heard something get knocked over, I think. We debated going back in to look for him. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but Patrick was still inside. We had to try. We retraced our steps, calling his name, our voices swallowed by the empty hallways. The only thing we found was his phone, lying on the floor near an overturned desk. Before calling the police, we checked the footage. We skipped to the end. Patrick was hiding under a desk. The camera, still recording, captured 2 pairs of shoes stopping in front of him. "Okay, you found me," Patrick's voice said, shaky but amused as he prepared to stand. Then, after a pause, his tone changed. "Wait, what are you doing here?" A sickening snap echoed through the speakers. Damien and I ran out of the school and called the police. They refused to comment on Patrick or tell us anything they found, but I overheard one of the cops telling another that it looked like the boy had been eaten. The air was thick and restless, buzzing with the energy of a crowded market that never seemed to sleep. Vendors shouted their prices like their lives depended on it, their voices crashing against each other in a relentless war for attention. The air stank of fried snacks and overripe fruit slowly rotting under the scorching sun, their sweetness curdling into something putrid. Stalls were packed so tight you had to squeeze through, colors bleeding into one another: bright oranges, blood-red apples, heaps of green chilies dripping with water droplets to fake freshness. The world was both vibrant and filthy, a beautiful mess that left you feeling like you needed a shower just from breathing. People swarmed like ants, shoving and stumbling over uneven ground littered with plastic wrappers and trampled leaves. Dust clung to the back of my throat, gritty and thick. My friend and I pushed through the chaos, trying to make conversation over the market's roar. She was rambling about her coaching, about the constant drama that seemed to follow her school friends like a bad smell. I nodded and hummed in all the right places, but my mind was already drifting. That's when I tripped. Something jagged hooked my foot, and I stumbled forward, my friend's hand darting out to catch me before I could crash face first into the grimy ground. Bye. Hey, say ciao. She scolded, her voice sharp with concern. Her eyes scanned me, checking for injuries like I was some clumsy kid. I'm fine, I muttered, still feeling the ghost of her grip on my arm. We kept walking, her voice picking up where it left off, a comforting hum I'd barely noticed. But then I saw them, a group of guys from coaching, huddled near some wild, overgrown patch at the edge of the pavements. They weren't just hanging out, they were staring at something. One of them was crouched down, elbows on his knees, eyes locked on something tangled in the mess of weeds and dirt. His hand hovered like he was too scared to tug whatever had caught his attention. The others stood around him, restless, their voices low and urgent. But that one guy, he stayed frozen, like he was seeing something the rest of the world couldn't. My friend kept talking. I kept replying. My words were automatic, mechanical. My focus was stolen by whatever had their attention. And then it happened. Everything else blurred out, because we saw her, the woman. She was sprawled out on the ground like a discarded doll, limbs bent at angles that made my stomach lurch. Her back was pressed against the filthy pavement, partially swallowed by the weeds clawing through the cracks. It was like the earth itself was trying to reclaim her. She looked like she was in her 40s, maybe 50s, but it wasn't age that had worn her down. It was something more brutal, a harshness that etched itself into her face, leaving her hollow and brittle. Her skin was ashen, stretched too tight over her bones. Her eyes, half closed, were glassy and void, like something vital had been scraped away, leaving only emptiness. A mouth hung open just slightly, lips cracked and dry like paper left out in the sun, as if she tried to speak, but the words had disintegrated before they even left her throat. And the flies, God, the flies, they swarmed her face, darting over her lips and nostrils, their tiny bodies flickering in the stale air like something too hungry to care, crawling, twitching. They buzzed with a restless, relentless hunger, their noise drilling into my skull. But she didn't move. Not a flinch, not even the smallest reflex to swat them away. Just nothing, like she wasn't even there anymore, like she was some hollowed-out shell, left behind by whatever force had once made her human. The air around her felt thick, heavy, as if all the noise and life of the market had recoiled from her presence, leaving behind a bubble of dead, suffocating silence. It wasn't just that she was lifeless. It was that everything around her felt wrong. I couldn't look away. Neither could my friend. We stood there, paralyzed, as locked on her like we were caught in some sick, twisted nightmare. Disgust coiled in my gut, bitter and sharp. But there was something worse. Something that clung to my skin like cold sweat and wouldn't let go. It wasn't just her twisted limbs or the flies or even the terrible stillness. It was the absence. That warmth you feel when someone's alive, even if they're unconscious. That faint, steady hum of existence. But with her, there was nothing. Just a void where life should have been. The market roared on behind us. People bargained, laughed, shouted, their lives colliding with hers but never actually touching. They walked past her like she was nothing more than garbage strewn across the pavements, and those who did notice only spared her a single, indifferent glance before moving on, like she was nothing, like she was less than nothing. My throat was dry, my heart beat this dull, heavy thud in my chest. I wanted to tear my eyes away from her, to walk away and pretend I hadn't seen anything. And I couldn't. My friend wasn't doing much better. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and unblinking. Fear, disgust, maybe even anger. It was all there, written across her features. Let's just keep moving, she whispered, her voice strained and shaky, her fingers clinging to my wrist like she was trying to pull me away from something to dart to face. But I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way the world just kept moving, leaving her behind, about the way life could be so casually discarded. Because somewhere deep in my gut, Something twisted and refused to let go. I'm not the one who doesn't believe in the paranormal and what happened at the East York Street apartments. Well, let's say it was a tragedy forgotten by time itself, and wholeheartedly thought the whole thing was a massive cover-up. That is why when finding myself standing before the crumbling facade of the old building, and couldn't help but feel a shiver run down my spine, but returning to an old apartment with the worst mistake of my life, and now I'm regretting everything. This wasn't your average run-down apartment block. Oh no. Not even the most dilapidated of structures could compound the ominous aura that clung to it like a shroud. The vibrant walls from its past were now a canvas for graffiti, a silent testament to the years of neglect. The windows, shattered, stared back at me like the hollow sockets of a skull, and the smell, oh the smell, was a thick cocktail of mold and despair, a scent so potent it could choke the life out of any hope that had the misfortune of lingering nearby. I had called this place home from 2006 to 2012, and even though a decade had passed, the memories remained as vivid as the day, and having fled, screaming into the night, my heart hammering in my chest like a drummer gone mad. They said it was a fire that had driven out the tenants before us, but the way the stories were circulated around town, the way the very air felt thick with secrets, you'd think it was something more, as there were no records, no newspaper articles, no charred remains to speak of. Just whispers of a night that had swallowed the building whole. It was like it had never happened. But the scars on the walls told a different story, a tale of agony and fear that was etched into every brick and beam. As I approached the main entrance, the boards that had been nailed over the door seemed to groan and protest at my return. The once yellow paint was now peeling away, revealing the rotting wood beneath, a sad metaphor for the lives that had once been lived within. The urge to turn back washed over me. I couldn't either need to face whatever was waiting for me, to finally lay to rest the ghost of my past. With a deep breath, I stepped into the abyss of the darkened hallway. Then, after entering the dusty lobby that was so thick it danced in the beams of the setting sun that dared to pierce through the broken windows, each step I took echoed through the emptiness, a rhythmic taunt that grew louder with every footfall. The whispers grew stronger, a chorus of unearthly voices that seemed to beckon me closer. You shouldn't have come back, they seemed to say, the words a symphony of despair that grew louder, more insistent, and also with a malevolence of pure hatred and disgust that I even set foot back into its domain, as this invisible force was claiming the right to be there. My heart racing, I made my way up the stairs, each creaking a silent scream in the stillness. The second-floor landing was a ghost town, littered with the remnants of lives that had once been full of promise when reaching out and touching the wall, the plaster crumbling under my fingertips, leaving a trail of dust that danced in the air like ash, and there I saw it. Apartment to be, the very place where it all began. The door hung open, like a gaping mouth waiting to devour me whole when stepping over the threshold, and the air grew colder, heavier with the weight of the years. But it was larger than I've remembered it being, with multiple rooms and reddish walls that pulsated with the heartbeat of a creature that didn't belong in our world, and to make it worse, snails were hanging on the ceiling that looked like teeth, and when touching one of the walls it was one with a trail of slime-like saliva dripping down as the breathing got heavier and aggressive. The bedroom door was ajar, just as I had left it all those years ago. The darkness within seemed to beckon me with a sinister grin when stepping closer. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that seemed to whisper my name. The laughter, that deep, soul-wrenching cackle, filled the air, sending chills down my spine. The same laughter that had haunted my dreams. The same laughter that had driven me from my bed in the dead of night, and the closet door, a rectangle of shadow, taunted me. It was like staring into the mouth of hell itself and knowing that you're about to be swallowed whole. With trembling hands, and after reaching for the door handle, my heart thudded against my ribcage like it was trying to escape, and with a deep breath, and pulled it open to reveal a horrifying scene of corpses that were half digested or already skeletons. The air was the most putrid smell imaginable, but numerous of them down a hallway resembling a stomach, with a bubbling liquid reeking of acid and flesh and bones. But there was something else in there, something alive, something that looked at me with eyes filled with pain and malice, and after looking into the abyss, looked back at me with a grin that sent a shiver down my spine as it dived into the substance, shrieking in pain and pleasure. While standing there, frozen with fear, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the laughter grew more intense until it was all I could hear, my sanity teetering on the edge of the abyss. Upon realizing that the fire was not the end, was just the beginning, and that the real horror had been lying in wait, hidden from the world, biding its time. And now it had me right where it wanted me. And after turning and bolted, the hallway stretched on forever, the stairs seemingly a mile away. The whispers turned into screams, the laughter into a cacophony of rage, and I could feel it. The thing that had been waiting, the thing that had been watching, the thing that had been born in the fire. It was coming for me, and it was closer than ever, my chest tight, my legs burning, causing me to stumble down the stairs. The doors of the other apartments slammed shut, as if in a silent bid to keep the horror within, bursting through the front door, and didn't stop running until my lungs felt like they were on fire, and my legs could no longer carry me, and realized this was a dead end. I've now been in the clutches of this living building and its interior while navigating the terrifying environment and dealing with the deformed inhabitants for days, and it seems like there is no escape from the grip of the East York Street apartments. While standing there, frozen with fear, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the laughter grew more intense until it was all I could hear, my sanity teetering on the edge of the abyss. Upon realizing that the fire was not the end, was just the beginning, and that the real horror had been lying in wait, hidden from the world, biding its time, and now it had me right where it wanted me. And after turning and bolted, the hallway stretched on forever, the stairs seemingly a mile away. The whispers turned into screams, the laughter into a cacophony of rage, and I could feel it. The thing that had been waiting, the thing that had been watching, the thing that had been born in the fire was coming for me, and it was closer than ever, my chest tight, my legs burning, causing me to stumble down the stairs, and the doors of the other apartments slammed shut, as if in a silent bid to keep the horror within, bursting through the front door, and didn't stop running until my lungs felt like they were on fire and my legs could no longer carry me, and realized this was a dead end. I've now been in the clutches of this living building and its interior while navigating the terrifying environment and dealing with the deformed inhabitants for days, and it seems like there is no escape from the grip of the East York Street apartments. Right as I'm writing this warning, please do not go finding this place, because I've uncovered something that showed me to the bone that happened before these events, and it shouldn't have been this way. A secret that had been buried for years. A truth that was too dark, too terrifying to face. And now, and it is all one can think about, a truth that has turned this place into a prison for the damned. And me, back in the 1930s, and the details are very grim as usual, as terrible. The former landlord James Maddow was a cruel and wealthy person who wanted to exploit the tenants during the Great Depression era, and when they could not pay, he would throw them into the basement and let them starve to death. But they didn't just die. They transformed into something else. Something that feeds on fear and despair. Something that is now a part of the very fabric of the building. It's like a living organism that feeds on the souls of the inhabitants. A prison that had been born from the ashes of greed and suffering. And allegedly he murdered his wife Norma for just making him angry by throwing her down a flight of stairs. I realized something terrifying, and a chilling thought came to my mind. Tenants before me who had witnessed this cold and calculated murder were intimidated to keep quiet, and their fear grew into something palpable, something tangible. It had fed the building, had made it what it is today. A monstrous abomination that craves the pain and sorrow of those who dare to enter its walls, would bleed this greenish liquid with a foul and odorous stench that was reminiscent of decaying flesh, and it grew stronger, more potent as the years went by, and the more tenants fell prey to Maddow's evil deeds and schemes as he continued his reign of terror, the more the building became a prison for the damned. Now, as I sit here in the dark, the whispers have turned to screams, the laughter to a chorus of anguish, and can feel the walls closing in, the floor beneath me pulsing with the hunger of the creature that dwells within, the same creature that had watched me all those years ago, that had fed on my fear and despair, the creature that had been born from the ashes of the East York Street apartments and the souls of those who had suffered within its walls, knowing nobody would never leave this place, or escape the clutches of James Maddow or whatever the hell he has become. A creature that had been born of fire and greed, and had grown into something so much worse, and I'm next in its line of food. As I started to lose hope suddenly, there was this room with a light flickering and a typewriter, as if it had been waiting for me to tell the story. Torn others of the horrors that dwell here, but fearing it is too late for me, and the whispers have turned into a deafening roar. The floor is shaking beneath me, and the creature is coming. It's so close, and can almost taste the fear in the air, the greenish liquid oozing under the door. And the only way to keep it at bay is to keep typing, to keep my mind focused, to not let the darkness consume me. This isn't just an abandoned apartment building, it is a predator of the highest and most terrifying order. And it will never let me go. Never let anyone who enters escape. The East York Street Apartments isn't just a place. It is a living nightmare. A tomb for the forgotten and the damned. If a person crosses through the threshold, they now one of them. Trapped in this hellish labyrinth of despair. My every breath a silent scream. My every heartbeat a mournful lament. My every step bringing me closer to nearest. The light flickers and the creature's breath grows hot on the back of my neck. Upon realizing that this is where my story ends, and the building's never-ending cycle of horror continues, forever, never to be forgotten by the souls it has claimed and the darkness it has spawned. Then I read about tenants who disappeared between 1945 and 1965. Some of them were found to have left everything in their apartments behind. Their keys still in the locks, their shoes outside their doors, but their bodies were never found. It was as if they had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the whispers of their final moments of terror and despair. The police had investigated, but the building was so vast and the corridors so twisted that they had found nothing. No sign of struggle, no evidence of foul play, and the whispers grew louder, more intense. The walls seemed to close in around me. The creature that had been born of the building's despair and anger had found me, and now it was going to make sure that I never left, that I would become just another story, another whisper in its eternal symphony of horror. The basement was where the real nightmare began, a labyrinth of darkness and pain, a place where the other countless souls who had been trapped here had suffered, and now it was my turn to experience the same fate. The walls were lined with the decayed remains of those who had come before me, their eyes wide open in silent screams of agony, the air thick with the stench of decay, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the echo of laughter, the same laughter that had haunted my dreams, and the same laughter that had driven me to the edge of madness. And now it was coming closer. The creature that had been born from the fires of hell was coming for me, and there was no escape. However, the ironic part was when I was here, none of these events were occurring except for the paranormal and unexplained things. And now that I'm telling the story, it is like the building knows and is responding. The creature's breath is hot on my neck and the whispers are deafening. The greenish liquid, it is rising around my ankles, and the floor is shaking with the creature's rage, and I've realized that the building itself was the real monster. A living, breathing entity that feeds on the fear and pain of its inhabitants. A creature that had been born from the ashes of greed and despair. A creature that had grown stronger with each passing year, and now it had me in its grasp, never to let go. My fight is not over yet, and it is about to begin when I'm planning to get to the bottom of the East York Street Apartments and its most terrifying, repulsive, and disturbing history of unsolved murders, mysterious disappearances, strange sightings, deformed animals, unusual people, and other paranormal activity, as well as distortions in time.